Employment Practices Liability Insurance, or EPLI, is what you need for coverage against website accessibility claims. And that's according to multiple insurance companies. So yesterday I listened to a podcast, and this was from an insurance company. It's the Got You Covered podcast. And this podcast was just from 2 weeks ago, so June 14th, 2023. And now on the screen with me, I've got the key takeaways, and I'm going to read through those. So the client was a large online retailer, but then there was a conflicting description because then the co-host said they're a smaller company like many that have a website and they're building a business based off of that. So it's hard to tell what size the company was, but she said that they did have the coverage, but there was a caveat where they had a very large deductible. So they were out of pocket, and she said she didn't know the true amount, but she was guessing it was around $60,000. And this was to engage in the lawsuit. So I don't know the extent to which they defended, then to settle it. And then there were additional costs in updating the website. And then what was interesting was she said after talking with carriers and clients, they're seeing this a lot. And then she researched it more and was surprised to hear of how many of her clients had been affected by it, and many hadn't even mentioned it to her. So then her and the co-host, they talked about the coverage, and she asked the co-host to guess the coverage. And his first guess was cyber insurance, but he didn't think that was right. And then he said he thought it would fall under the management liability policy, the EPLI, and that was the answer. So employment practices liability insurance, it offers coverage to employers against claims made by employees alleging discrimination. This is from the Got You Covered podcast by Hickok and Boardman Insurance Group. And I will provide insurance on all of the resources I mentioned today and then a YouTube description. So I went and I read one write-up on EPLI insurance, and this was from GB&A Insurance, and I thought it was a very good write-up. And the key bullet points here are: many companies assume they are covered by their general liability policy or their media liability coverage policy under their cyber insurance policy, but it's actually EPLI that it is best suited to cover lawsuits alleging ADA violations. And this is despite the name, because when I read the name, I was like, well, how does this cover it? It says, the write-up continued, there are certain terms that and conditions that are needed to be included. It says, even then, EPLI policies are limited in their scope of coverage. So before I read off these terms and conditions, I'm not going to describe them or go into summarizing them. I will link to the article if you want to learn more about these terms and conditions, you can. But the one key takeaway here is that employment practices liability insurance policies are best suited despite its name, because these are policies that cover against claims of discrimination. And so the terms and conditions that you would likely want to include according to this write-up are third-party coverage, website media coverage, broad definition of discrimination, coverage for injunctive relief, fines and penalties, plaintiff's attorney's fees, the hammer clause, retentions, and first dollar defense. And this is from GB&A Insurance. And then then I read from on Insureon.com, and small businesses pay an average of $222 per month for this policy, and that's $2,664 annually. And this data is from April 2023. And the information also stated that the average deductible that Insureon customers select for EPLI is $10,000. And this is there's a pre-occurrence limit. So while the policy is active, the insurer will pay up to this amount to cover any single claim. And then there's the aggregate limit. During the lifetime of the policy, usually 1 year, the insurer will pay up to this amount to cover claims. So I will link to all of those resources below. But the important thing is that there is extreme limitations on this. So first of all, the deductible is $10,000, and then there are limits. So even if you have this coverage, while it would be nice to have, you're still going to pay a significant amount, and that amount would likely exceed what it would cost to make your website fully WCAG conformant. And this is as a small business. Obviously, the coverage is going to increase for larger organizations, but as a small business, um, to pay out $222 a month and then have a deductible, let's say it's 10,000 to even start with. Most of these claims are settled for between $5,000 and $20,000. So that's a lot to pay out just for insurance, and then keeping in mind that there are limits to this insurance. So it's quite pricey to be insured against website accessibility claims. And I encourage you to research more, but this is what I found in my in my preliminary research. So the way, there are a few options you have. One is my ADA compliance course. Another is my WCAG course. This is training, and whether you get it from me or not, you're going to need to train your digital personnel, so your employees, your staff, your contractors, any agencies you work with. You will need to train them, or at least have them know about how to make a website accessible, or how to make a website WCAG 2.1 AA conformant, because otherwise they're going to continually introduce accessibility issues. So you want to audit and find and fix any issues, and then remediate. Now, audit and remediation can cost several $1,000s. And if you want to get an estimate on digital accessibility services, I will provide a link to my video on a digital accessibility cost calculator. I will provide that in the description as well. But the cost of becoming WCAG 2.1 AA conformant, were you to do it correctly, would likely be less than the amount that you would end up paying out if you were covered by EPLI insurance. So while insurance would be nice, and particularly against those potential high ceiling settlement amounts and claims, I don't it usually doesn't to in my experience, for small businesses, it doesn't go that high. Like the total amount paid out to resolve a claim is not above, let's say, $25,000. So I think the best course of action, and this has remained the case, is to make your website WCAG 2.1 AA conformant. And that's for multiple reasons, including AB 1757, and I'll provide a video for that. So there will be many resources in the YouTube description, but the key takeaway here is there is potential insurance available. It would be EPLI, but what is important to remember is that there are limits, there is a deductible, and there is a cost to even having this insurance, and you need to weigh the risk and reward, because there's also, you have to pay out for the insurance beyond the limits and beyond the deductible. You have to weigh the risk and reward against WCAG conformance and investing in accessibility. So, of course, everything depends on your situation, but this is the information that I have found. I encourage you to research insurance, and then also look into options for digital accessibility.